What?
All right, we're with Dale Miller in Newark, Ohio. It's November 19th, 2013. This is Doug Stout doing the interview. Dale, where were you born, Dale?
Born in Basel, Ohio, November 7th, 1924,
Okay. And,
which is now Baltimore, Ohio. But
oh, okay. It changed. When did that change?
there were two little towns close together, and so they dropped the Basel, and it's all Baltimore now.
Well, I'm glad to know that. What did your parents do for a living?
My parents, my mother was a housekeeper, homekeeper. My dad worked on the New York Central Railroad for a long, long time. I think ever since he was about 16 years old or so.
Did you have any siblings?
Only I have one sister in California. Yeah.
Okay. What were you doing before your service in World War II?
Good question. I was working at the F.W. Woolworth Company in Lancaster. And so I worked there for right after I got out of high school. I was only 17, couldn't get a job until I was 18. So that was one reason I kind of took that for spending money. But it led to where I was assistant manager before I went into the service. So.
And when did you go in the service?
May the 18th of 43.
Okay.
Had to stop and think about that.
Right. Were you did you enlist or were you drafted?
We were drafted. I tried to join the Navy with three of my other friends, and the Navy wouldn't take me because I had glasses or eyesight. So I'd go down to the eye doctor or the naval recruiter and try, and he'd fail me every time I'd go. So about the sixth time I was down there, I had the chart memorized pretty well, and I was doing pretty good till he said, "Read it backwards," and that. So anyhow, it was good enough to go to the Army. You know.
Okay, and then where did you do your basic training at?
Fort Meade, Maryland. George Meade.
Then did you have any other schooling after that, or did they ship you right out after basic?
Several different things. They sent me to water purification school for about 6 months. Other than that, I guess with no special training.
How well do you think you adapted to military life?
I think pretty good. Pretty good. Couldn't wait to get home.
Yeah, I'll bet. Nobody can when they. So when did you? So you served in Europe.
Yes.
When did you head to Europe?
Oh, I can't remember the date, but
Close enough.
we left in latter part of June. I know we landed at Glasgow, Scotland on July the 4th, which they lost some of our equipment, and otherwise we would have probably been there a lot sooner, but things got snafu, and so we didn't get there till July the 4th.
Of 44?
That was in 40, must have been 43.
43?
Yeah, it must have been. In 60 years.
Right. So then, from there, now did you land at Normandy?
Yeah, we landed at Utah Beach. Most everybody says Omaha Beach and so forth, but there was 3 or 4 different beaches: Sword Beach and Gold Beach, and
Juneau.
so we landed at Utah Beach. And the time, I don't remember what day it was, but half the time you didn't know where you were.
Right. But did you land on D-Day?
No.
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 Okay, so it was D-Day plus.
Yeah, it was about two weeks or so after D-Day. But
What?
it was still pretty well torn up.
That's what I was going to ask. How bad was the?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I know they had a big German POW camp right there on the beach, and it was the only lights around. They had spotlights all over, so they wouldn't bomb the POW camp. But it was still pretty messy.
Were there any specific campaigns then from that time that you served on?
Well, we were in 5 different battles. Um, I guess St. Lo was crossing the Moselle River. It seemed like we were always trying to get across the river. That was the Moselle River was, I think, our first crossing. The Seine River, I believe, might have been their first crossing at Fontainebleau. Of course, at St. Lo, they finally broke out from the hedgerows and made a dash across France. But just one thing after another.
Okay. So you were basically marching, just going right across.
Right.
I didn't ask you, what unit did you serve with?
160th Combat Engineers.
Okay. So then were you at the Battle of the Bulge then? Did you end
Right.
up in
That was that was one of our, well, I got hurt during the last battle, but I went to the Battle of the Bulge, which was quite messy. I know if you heard about the prisoner being shot at Malmedy, I guess it is, where they shot some of our prisoners instead of taking them prisoner. They killed them. I was only about 20 miles from that when that happened.
Well, now, was that something you heard about right when it happened? I mean,
Oh yeah.
so word spread quick on that.
Oh yeah. The Germans was infiltrating people dressed in American uniforms and so on. So you really didn't know when you met somebody in the Jeep, or when you met somebody, you didn't know whether they were really an American soldier or whether it was a German. But that was at present. If they caught him, they shot him, and they did.
Did that change how you think?
The whole army changed.
Yeah.
Take no prisoners.
Now, you told me before, you think you were wounded twice?
Right. Yeah.
Where were you wounded the first time at?
I think I guess we're going across the Moselle River. I believe that was at, I can't think of the name of the town right offhand. Maybe it was the Moselle. It must have been the Moselle River. It seemed like we were always crossing the Moselle River because it kind of snaked all around. And I got the name of the town right on the tip of my tongue. But anyhow, that was the first time I got hurt from some shrapnel or small arms fire. I'm not sure which it was, because it was so much artillery and mortars and small arms. So I don't know. But then the second time I got hurt, it was in March the 10th of 44, I guess. Yeah. And that was in Germany. We were getting ready to cross the Rhine and bringing up all the bridging material and cleaning the mines, clearing the mines. And one of the S-mines, somebody stepped on something, and so 2 of my buddies were killed, and one other soldier that I didn't know. So I guess I was the only survivor of the 4. So lucky.
Did either one of those, when you were wounded, did you have to ship back to a hospital, or was it?
Yeah, they took me back to first aid camp, like MASH.
Right.
And so I don't really remember much about that. But then back to an evac hospital, and finally flew me back to England, and then from England to New York, back home. And so then from Mitchell Field and in the hospital there, I went to it was Nashville, to camp there, and to a nerve center. And I had shrapnel in my back and so on. And then from there I went to Louisville to the nerve center. That's the way it was. And then I was discharged from Louisville in November, about Thanksgiving Day, around Thanksgiving, and home finally.
Did you get much communication from home when you were out in the field? I mean, were you keeping up with the mail and?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I took with the V-mail that was the big deal during the war. V-mail was, something like the internet. Only it was on paper. So that was a good way to communicate. And lots of times you didn't have time to write home and so forth, but we always managed. The mail was kind of slow.
What kind of things did you guys do to cope with, the maybe the downtime, just the tedium or the time between battles and that? I mean, just to get by.
We were always busy. If we were in combat, we were very seldom we would pull back and maybe blow a railroad bridge or put a bridge across a road track or over a canal or something like that. So they kept us busy. They kept you busy.
The Bulge, everybody always talks about the cold.
It was cold, very cold. And I tell you, we went in with nothing but an overcoat. If you were lucky, you had your overcoat, and that's about all you had. You didn't have any winter clothing, and it was about zero most of the 3 or 4 days. And of course, until the sun came out, we had no air cover, and it was cold.
Yeah, and that's why that was going to be one of my next questions: is whether you had proper clothes, because I know most of the time I hear that nobody did.
Nobody did.
Lots of frostbite. You didn't have any problem with frostbite?
Several of the guys. I was pretty lucky. I kind of took care of my own, and you learn to rely on yourself for preservation, I guess. And I always try to keep dry socks or clean socks, and I'd always keep enough ammo back that if I needed ammo, I would have a little extra ammo. So you kind of relied on yourself, really.
Now, I know you're an avid fisherman now. Were you a fisherman then?
Oh, well, yeah, I was.
Probably didn't have a chance to fish.
To go fishing over there, you'd take a hand grenade, throw it in the river, and pick them up on the bridge.
When you came back home, what did you end up doing?
I really couldn't work for about a year, and I guess I went back into the retail business. And like I say, my cousin and I went to General Motors to apply for a job. Well, they took him, but because I was wounded and handicapped, they wouldn't take me as a job, which is a fine thing,
Right.
Fight for General Motors, and then they couldn't find a place for you. So that was one reason I went back to retail. It was about all I could handle. So I spent the rest of my working life in retail.
Back here in Newark?
Yeah. I went back to, I guess it was Columbus. I worked in Columbus for about a year, and then came back to Lancaster, and from Lancaster to Newark. Norman can probably tell you more about that than.
Where'd you end up working here in Newark? Where did you end up working here in Newark?
Well, I wound up with W.T. Grant Company.
Okay.
Had a shoe company or a shoe business for, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, I suppose, down on the north side of the square.
Okay.
And then they went out of business. So I went to work for the W.T. Grant Company and kind of retired from them when they closed. So it seemed like everywhere I went, we lost.
Ended up closing. Do the wounds that you suffered during the war, did they still bother you, or?
Well, yeah, never forget. But they still do, actually.
Do you remember where you were when the war ended?
When the war ended,
I realize that's two different places.
Like VJ Day,
Right.
when Japan surrendered, I was in Nichols Hospital in Louisville, and they literally shut down the base. Nobody came in, nobody left, because they had to control the crowd. Everybody was, real happy about the war being over.
Right.
So,
Were you able to? I mean, it looks like you were able to keep in touch with the guys you served with when you came home.
pretty much, especially one. My best friend lived in Mansfield, and they through the mail and so forth. I know I got an armlet of mail when I was in England from catching up to me, But anyhow, my buddy in Mansfield didn't know. He thought I had died. And it was about 10 years before we ever got back together again, which made it kind of interesting.
I guess that made it interesting.
So he was real close. We shared many chocolate bar or whatever, and we lost him last April, though. So. But other than that, way most of the guys are scattered out too much. But we would send Christmas cards and stuff like that. But nothing as close as Willard and I was. And he was like a brother, really.
If there was one story that you think needs to be told of your experience in the war, that you would really think people need to remember, or students later on, can you think of what that story would be?
Oh, there's so many. I kind of hate to point out any one. I can't think of any one.
Okay. Nothing comes straight to mind.
No.
Okay. How well do you think you adjusted back to civilian life?
I thought pretty well. And,
How do you think this experience of your service changed your life?
come on up and sit down. You might as well join. You've been listening, so you might as well join them. Well, it really made me want to help the veterans, and I've worked with veterans for almost ever since I was able. When I recovered, and I've been a DAV member for 69 years, 68 years. So, and I'm a member of the American Legion, life member of the Purple Heart, life member of DAV, life member of AMVETS. Do a lot of work with the veterans.
Dale's wife, Norma, has joined us at the table now, just to let you know if you hear another voice. You've been listening, I think, probably. What can you add anything to anything that Dale has said? Anything that you see, how the war impacted him, or how his service to our country has changed him?
I don't remember a lot about the war because I was still in elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't go into high school then until after the war was over.
Right.
And but we did study about it because we got new history books and so forth. But I've learned a lot from being married all these years, and so I didn't, of course, know Dale when he was younger and so forth. But down through the years, they're talking about all the stress now and so forth with the veterans coming back. That didn't hit Dale for several years afterwards, but they didn't really know a lot about it and so forth. And So one day, the director at that time was Mary Oliver at the Veterans Office, and she requested that the commissioners attend a meeting at the Reese Center. So I went with Dale that day, and I sat there and listened. And then I realized what he had gone through and so forth.
Right. And then, could they get a handle on it at that time to what to do then to help?
It was still a while yet, wasn't it?
Yeah. I don't think you'll ever get over it.
I mean, you were a young man and saw
Right.
terrible things. Is there any story that Dale has told you that maybe, because he said there were so many of them, but maybe is a favorite story that you like to hear that you can remember that?
I remember going to his Army reunions and sitting there one afternoon and listening to the guys and so forth. And this is what I asked: how did you guys ever have time to fight a war? And they said, oh, we managed, you know. And so there were a lot of good times, but then a lot of stress and so forth. But Dale finally got in touch with his favorite person, I guess you could say Willard was.
Mm-hmm.
Did you tell about Willard?
Yeah. Okay.
And I really enjoyed the time we spent with Willard and his wife and so forth. And
Dale, does it help? Because I know you've been in a lot of newspaper articles.
Mm-hmm.
Does it help to talk about it, or does it help more to talk about it with somebody else that's gone through it, or?
Well, you know, when you think back, like the Army reunion, like she said, it was all humorous. So you kind of cover up the bad with the good, I think.
Three years ago, when they dedicated the Purple Heart Monument,
Mm-hmm.
Mary Oliver did a wonderful speech on Dale. And so I sent a copy to both of our children because our son, of course, lives in Georgia, so he couldn't come. My daughter had to work that day. And they both called and said, we didn't know Dad had two Purple Hearts. They knew the one. And he never talked about that. And they learned a lot from that speech and so forth. And but at that time, when they were growing up, no, he didn't. He didn't talk about it.
Is that just because you just didn't want to talk about it, or because nobody was asking?
A little bit of both, I think.
Uh,
I thought the kids wouldn't understand, and they were younger. And
well, something I never understood. He would never take the kids and I to see the fireworks on 4th of July. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that he said, I couldn't do that. He said, when you have laid night after night and that's all you hear, you can't go through it again.
And I think that's important for people to realize.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we don't realize a lot of times is that, we can read it in a history book, but you can't read it in a history book. You can only read so much, and it's so very important that people like yourself can share that with us, for the ones that didn't make it home too. I mean, so that we can hear their story also. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experience, Dale?
Oh, I guess not.
I think you're being awful modest.
I am.
He really is.
Yeah, and that's
Well, you ask somebody what they did when they were in service, and well, I was in the Air Corps. I was in the infantry, and I wouldn't want your job, you know. And they find out you're a combat engineer, boy, I wouldn't want your job.
What all did a combat engineer have to do, Dale?
Everything. Everything. Whenever they got in trouble, we were it. So lots of times we were ahead of the infantry, picking up mines or blowing up stuff, and so like I say, they did everything. Whatever they needed, boy, we were there to do.
I remember several years ago, one of our neighbor men had drove a truck when he was in the service, and he said, they were comparing notes, and he said, well, Dale, I went overseas before you did. And Dale said, yeah, but you didn't travel any place till we got there and built the bridges.
Yeah, I know one particular story, you asked for a story, but one particular time the tanks had stopped at the river and couldn't get across the river. And the tanks were in the way of getting the bridge equipment down to put the bridge up. So it was kind of really mass confusion there. Nobody was doing anything about it. So this recon car pulled up, and it was General Patton. Of course, it was dark. You couldn't see and who it was or whatever. And he said, what the hell's going on there? And about every other word was a swear word. And so I told him, I didn't know who it was. I was just take it easy, buddy. You're not going anywhere. What's going on? So we finally told him, well, the tanks are in the way. We can't get our bridge equipment down. Well, about 5 minutes later, the tanks started up and moved out. So that was my experience with General Patton.
Excuse my ignorance. With the 160th Engineer, who were you? What division and things were you with?
Okay, we were mostly with the 5th Division, the 4th and 5th Division, and 2 or 3 armored divisions. I got a whole list of it in there, but like I say, wherever they needed us, that's where we went. But we followed the 5th Division and the 4th Division mostly all through, mostly with the 5th Division.
Okay.
I should put that in there too. All the companies and outfits.
Should make some notes and make sure that's in the book that you've got there.
You won't forget.
I took this to the DAV meeting one time because one of our friends from Granville did not believe of all of these pictures, some of them. And so I took this to show her.
Concentration camps.
That's what she didn't believe, and the bodies is what I was looking for, where they were just stacked up on top of each other.
Now you were you out before they reached concentration camps?
No, some of them. We went to one in particular. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, they found most of them after I got hurt, and after they crossed the Rhine and so forth. But we knew about it.
But you were there with 1 or 2 of them, concentration camps that you saw, or?
There was one in particular, yeah. Of course, we never stayed in one place very long.
Right.
You know, we just passed through. But we have pictures to prove that, you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, that can't be." Well, it could be.
Were there? Had they moved the prisoners, or I shouldn't say prisoners, the detainees out of the concentration camp ahead of you guys by the time you'd gotten there, or were there still people alive there?
As I remember, they were still in the camp, and like I say, we didn't tarry very long. We went on,
Right.
you know, so we left whoever was in the rear echelon to clean up and do that.
Okay, so who's walking around with a camera? I guess taking all these pictures. I mean, do you?
You know, that's a good question because we weren't allowed to have cameras at all. So where some of these pictures came from, I'll never tell you.
Okay. I've wondered that because, you know, in this day and age, we've all got cameras everywhere, you know, on our phones and everything else. But to see pictures like that, I knew you guys aren't carrying Kodaks in your back pocket and something taking pictures every.
They probably had correspondence there, but we've never really we never really met any of them that I can remember.
You
You
never
don't-
saw Ernie Pyle?
No.
You don't remember somebody standing around flashbulbs going off otherwise.
No.
One time for that.
The Stars and Stripes newspaper was the big popular thing when you get a lot of information from that. But
What do you want generations that might listen to this later to remember about the vets from World War II?
I don't think they'll ever understand what we went through, and it's like right now the World War II veterans are kind of forgotten, really, and that's the way it'll be.
Well, we hope not. We hope that this helps
That's the way it'll be.
give a voice to them. So, is there anything else either one of you'd like to add before we turn this off? All right. Well, I thank you for your time. Let me get this turned off.
I think it was.
What was your reception like?
Great. The people were great, of course. I couldn't understand them, with all that brogue, and I felt bad about that because you'd have to ask them what. But we weren't there very long. We moved down into England and down around Birmingham, just far enough north where the German planes couldn't bomb. They bombed London in the southern part of England. They could go that far, but that was about the extent of where they could reach into England. So we wasn't in England very long. We finally got our equipment straightened up and crossed the channel. The channel was rougher than the ocean was. Most all the guys got seasick, and it was a mess.
Did it bother you?
No, thank goodness. I'm generally susceptible to that, but I got through that okay.
The ship you went over seas on, what was it?
Oh, the SS America. And then during the war, it was the West Point, but it was a big luxury liner. But they had stripped down. Wasn't nothing left on that ship but the woodwork. They took everything off.
And I can remember telling Mrs. Hockey and his mom, and they said, "Oh no, they wouldn't have gone overseas." I said, "You ask him," and they could not believe that either,
Right.
And,
Yeah, there was about maybe 6 bunks. So I had the top bunk, thank goodness. Everybody was getting sick. But it was a beautiful ship, and it only took us about 7 days to cross the ocean, which that time, was a pretty good time. But that was during the submarine war, when the subs were getting so many of our ships. And I remember one time I woke up there and it was really cold. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, they would zigzag across, and got up close to where the cold weather was. Then maybe the next day they'd be down where it was warmer." But I mentioned seasickness. I didn't feel too good one day, and I thought, "Well, I'm going up on deck." And I was asleep on deck. Next morning I woke up and my wife was just rusty red, salt water. So I didn't know what salt water was, and so I didn't sleep on deck after that.
So did you have to clean that rifle, or did they give you a new one?
Yeah, I got to clean that rifle. I lost that rifle most of half a dozen times. We'd get overrun or something, and you just leave everything. And the next day, go back and pick it all up or see if you could find it. Then I lost it 2 or 3 times. I had a Winchester. And it was probably, I think there's only 2 in the whole squad or platoon. So I was glad I had a Winchester. It was a good rifle. We got back on the 500-yard range, and I think I needed 1 point to score expert. Well, 500 yards, that bull looks about like that big around. So anyhow, I made the final shot, and I think I got a 3 or a 4. So that was good, but it was a good rifle.
When you crossed, were there Did you cross that with a bunch of ships, or were you by
All
yourself?
by ourselves, yeah. All
No
by-
escort.
No escort.
Were there any guns on the ship?
Not that I could see. There was over 10,000 people on that ship. The top deck was nurses, had all the nurses on the top deck. And our battalion got the job of pulling fire guard, so we got the nurses deck. Now, we had the main deck, but we got the, like I say, the fire guard. You were on guard. It said fire guard, but you were on guard for anything, really. And I was sitting there one night, something like that. I looked, there wasn't anything there. And I'm sitting out there in the aisle writing letters, and look, nothing there. Well, I'm just going to sit here and watch. And there was a rat ran across there, I'm telling you. I couldn't believe that.
Did you
So,
talk
yeah.
about the popcorn?
No, not interested.
Oh, that was kind
Sure,
of
I
cute.
am.
Well, we stayed at, this is, I believe, in Luxembourg. And we would kind of just go into a barn or wherever we could get in and stay or sleep one night or whatever. So how we got into this house, I'll never tell you, but anyhow, they had two little girls, probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old. And they were cute little things, but we stayed there for about a week. And we'd go out at night and do our dirty work, and of course come back in next morning all muddy and bloody and dirty. And the lady there, she would take all of our clothes and wash them that day, so we would have clean clothes for the night. And the old gentleman had a big bin of apples down there between the stable and the house. The stables were built right onto their houses most of the time. So anyhow, before we left, we had ate all of his apples. So we all got together and chipped in and left him some money and so forth. But I'll never forget, she took care of us like a mother. I mean,
Well, he's not going to tell you this, but his mother had sent a cake, wasn't it? Well, anyway, she'd sent something, and she had it packed in popcorn. So he let the girls eat the popcorn. And they just thought that was so good. So he wrote to his mother, and she sent him unpopped popcorn. And he put it over the fireplace, wasn't it?
yeah,
And popped
they
it.
thought that
And
was
they
a big
just,
deal.
those girls just thought that was wonderful,
I'll bet.
to watch that corn pop.
Willard said they came back through after the war was over, and they were making the rounds, and he said they came back through, and he stopped at that same place and talked to them. And of course, they wanted to know what happened to all of us and who was. So she got to know us pretty well. But she, like I say, she really took care of us. She got clean clothes every day, and
Did you have any? Did anybody have any contact with her after the war? You know of?
probably Willard would have been the only one, if ever. But they had little red deer over there, which, like our deer, is pretty big. But the little red deer over there was only just they curl up in a ball when they sleep, and it's about the size of a basketball where they lay. But anyhow, we thought we'd go get them some meat. We'd shoot some rabbits for them, or a deer, or whatever. We weren't supposed to shoot the king's deer, but we did. But those jackrabbits over there was almost as big as a deer. And so anyhow, we kept them supplied with some red meat for a while in exchange for their apples that we stole. Or you might as well say stole them.
Did most of the time, if you guys ran into civilians, were they all right with you, or?
Until you got to Metz. And Metz is right kind of on the border. There was a mixture there of good people and bad. I know one day, I forget who this was, but anyhow, the lady poured boiling water down out of the window.
Oh my goodness!
And one of the guys in our squad, he just backed off and he just shot the whole damn window frame out. But you had to watch because you didn't know who was your friend and who wasn't your friend.
Right.
But it was a big German garrison where they had a lot of equipment, a lot of horses, beautiful horses. In this one room, they had American equipment that we had never seen before, and they had it, and we didn't know. So
Did you ever talk to a German POW or anything, or?
no, we didn't much. There, when we crossed the river, like I was telling you, the night we crossed the Swollen River, I went back down to the CP later on, probably about 3 o'clock in the morning or so. And Willard and I went down the stair step. There was kind of a landing. You started down the stair and the landing, and then you went on down into the basement. And so I just walked in and set my rifle against the wall. I heard somebody say, "Comrade, comrade." These guys must have been standing on that step someplace. We must have walked right by them, but they come down to give up. They wanted to surrender. That was kind of scary.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah, one night I was picking up a minefield in the road, and I looked up and I saw these 6 or 8 guys coming along facing me. Of course, they all had long winter coats on. Well, look out, boy, because they always had their long winter coats. And all I had the mine detector on, and then I had a couple grenades, but I had a grenade in my field jacket pocket, and I couldn't get the thing out in time. I couldn't get it out with all the straps and stuff. So I just stepped back in the garage and kind of waited till they went by. So they'd gone down to the CP to give up. So they don't know how close they came to being blown up with a hand grenade. Yeah.
So you were out there by yourself doing
yeah.
the mine sweep?
Yeah.
They didn't send anybody out there with you to...
Well, they were, but they were behind and so forth. Yeah. The mine sweeper goes first, picks up, and of course, then with their stuff laying all over, their shell cases and artillery pieces laying in the road, and you never know whether it's a mine or not till you look. Because the detector picks up anything metal, and if there's any metal laying around there, you have to decide what it is. So, in other words, the guys behind you don't get too close.
Right.
Yeah. So we did a little bit of everything.
And Willard was with you doing that?
Most all the time.
Same...
Yeah. It was kind of funny because we got to be pretty close friends, and if I would volunteer for something, which we very seldom did volunteer, but if he'd volunteer for something, I'd always go, okay, And if I'd volunteer, he'd, well, I'll follow you. So one time in particular, we was on this truck, and they were driving along, and they were going to set up machine guns in certain different spots. So the first stop, they a couple guys on this. So these guys got out, and all they had for protection was a piece of sheet metal over a ditch. So the second stop, I thought, well, we might as well get this over with, so we'll volunteer. So went in there, and somebody had been in before, and they had hot water, and that was like heaven. And we set the machine gun up in the kitchen window and just lived it up. So many stories, so many good stories.
Well, Willard picked Dale up and carried him up to a jeep when he was wounded. And now Willard wasn't much taller than me, and so then he didn't know. From then on, they didn't know whether Dale had made it or not. And so when we moved to Newark, Dale always said, "Well, I ought to see if I could find Willard." And I suppose maybe he's back in Mansfield, Well, he never really did anything about it. So our neighbor man, the older man down the street, had a nephew, and he always went to Mansfield and visited him. So I wrote Willard's name down one time, and I said, while you're up there, look in the phone book and see if you can find him. Well, not only did he find him, he called him. And so when he came back, he gave me his address and so forth, so Dale sat down and wrote to him. And so that's how they got back together.
Was Willard originally from Ohio, too?
Yeah. Yeah, he lived in Mansfield. Well, I guess he was born someplace else in Virginia.
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam,
wherever
Ohio.
that's
okay.
at.
Amsterdam.
But
yeah.
anyhow, he lived in Mansfield most of his life, I guess. So, yeah, he was a good friend.
And
Yeah, but we went to the Army reunion in '96, and a lot of them were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary because they got married, right after they got out of the service. And so someone asked me, "Are you and Dale been married 50 years?" I said, "Hardly." I went, "No, I hadn't even gone into high school yet."
I
So-
called Willard one day, and I forget which it was. The reunion, I guess, when I called him. How would you like to go to a reunion? Oh, yeah, okay. So that's how the reunion thing got started. I saw that in one of the better magazines where they had an ad that our outfit was having a reunion. So that's been 2 years ago, I called him. I said, "How would you like to take the honor flight to Washington?" "Well, yeah." So we did that, and that was really about the last time we really got together.
Yeah.
But I kept kidding him. I said, "I'm never going to ask you to do anything else again now."
I think they enjoyed it probably as much as I did. And we, up at Belleville, there's an Amish restaurant, and of course they'd come from Mansfield, we'd come from Newark, we'd meet there and have lunch, and then we'd always had a nice fireplace, and we'd go out there and sit and visit. So I enjoy, and I miss that.
Right.
But
We went up last time we were up there, and like she said, it didn't seem the same. So
it wasn't the same, and so
So,
Give me a pen.
so
Yeah.
your group, I mean, you had reunions?
Yeah, we did until we got too old to travel.
I felt really bad the last one. We were ready to go, and I had cancer surgery the day before, and I got up and I thought, I can't sit in that car for 6 hours
No.
today. But I wanted Dale to go, and he said no. And but Willard and Jerry went, and they decided that would be the last one because, well, Dale and Willard were the youngest ones, and they were in their 80s by that time, and so all of the other guys were older. Of course, General May, was that his name?
Mays.
He was a general.
M-A-Y-E-S.
Mays.
M-A-Y-S.
He wasn't much older than the guys.
He was 22 when he made second lieutenant, which he was commander of the company commander. So, which he really should have been a captain, and he didn't get his captain bars for a long time after that. But he took care of the men. I will say that he really tried to do good for us.
And he came. He always came to the reunions, and I don't know. We were traveling someplace for dinner that night, and Earl lived there, and he was familiar. So he went. He just took off like a bat out of Hades. He was gone. But everybody followed General Mays. And when we got there, I said, "The guys are still following you."
Well, he did admit, or did say that all his promotions and everything he did, he said, you guys helped me do it. So
Yes, what
he
he said.
That was nice of him.
It sounds like it sounds like you had a good commander.
Yeah, he was really good. Well, we had Lieutenant Hart was a good platoon commander too. He got hurt not too long after we got overseas. I guess about the first skirmish we had. Then they kind of come and went after that.
But his widow and son came. Hardwick. They came to a couple of the reunions. By that time, he had passed away. And, but every year you go back, there would be some that had passed away through the year that you wouldn't see.
Well, I think there were some of them probably couldn't afford it, too.
Yeah. Where did you always meet the same place? I mean, same.
Pretty much.
Where at?
Louisville.
Okay.
Louisville.
They always had one year we went to Patton's Museum, and you ever had a chance to do
No, I
that,
haven't.
go. It's at Fort Knox,
Yeah.
and that's really fabulous. I have to tell you this. We had sweatshirts made with 160th Combat Engineer, and in back they had a list of places that they had been, and we were wearing our sweatshirts that day, and Jerry and I had gone to the restroom, and the guys were waiting for us, and this young man came up, and he had a knapsack on his back and so forth, and he wanted to know if they had been in England and where they were, and he said, well, that's about 20 miles from where I was born and raised, you know. Shook their hands and said, I want to thank you for what you did for our people.
Probably a student over here, I imagine, and
Yeah.
a real nice kid, nice guy.
How does that make you feel? I mean, if you're wearing your veteran's cap or something, and somebody just comes up and
Yeah, you don't know what to say. In fact, I never know what to say except thank you for thanking me, you know, and that's about it. But one day it was raining, and I very seldom wear it. But we were down to the drugstore that day, and I put my hat on and went in the drugstore, and the old gentleman there, he says, "See here, Ben, I'll give you 10% off your bill." Okay.
okay,
And yeah, they when he wears, of course, it says World War II on it, veteran, you know, and he has his Purple Heart on it and so forth, and a lot of them will come up, and you'd be surprised how many other veterans, younger, you know, that've been in Korea. The guys my age were in
Right.
Korea and so forth, and the Vietnam veterans, they'll come up and thank him too.
Yeah, a guy out to the Olive Garden the other night. They talked me into going to the Olive Garden, Veterans Day, against my better judgment with all that crowd. So one of the guys came over and said, "Thank you for your service, and I respect the Purple Heart." So that was nice.
But did he tell you about the Purple Heart Monument? How it got here? He decided we should have a Purple Heart Monument. So he started working on it, and he worked several years to get the money and so forth.
Through the Parks Department, mostly.
Yeah, oh yeah, you go to the Parks Department and bug them. Well, finally, he got the money, and then he had to find a place to put it. Well, they wouldn't let him put it on the courthouse square. Can't do that anymore. Although they put the fountain there.
Well, they won't
But
put anything else in.
Anyway, he talked the Parks Department into letting him put it up there at 6th Street Park. And so there were so many Purple Heart recipients showed up that day that they dedicated it, that they started Purple Heart here in Hello?
In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow night, Purple Heart meeting.
Hey Kim, can I call you back? Okay, I'll talk. Anyway, they started Purple Heart Club here, and since then they've become Purple Heart City. Licking County is a Purple Heart County, and now the governor has signed, and we're Purple Heart State.
Do you have a copy of that speech you said that was?
Yes, I do.
Hey, show me our Purple Heart plaque there, Norman, when you go around the corner.
Yeah, well, I've got Doug. I'll come
Yeah.
around this way, Doug.
Okay.
The guy surprised me. They gave me a plaque because of my work with the monument, I guess, and I really
He's got a lot
appreciated
of
that. But
plaques here.
it's such a pretty plaque. I really do like it. Well, she's got a whole bunch of them in there, I know, but
Let's see.
Did you have trouble
put it in.
raising the money to do that?
well, I thought I would.
Okay.
I'm like, how am I going to do this? You know, and, well, I know you get the merchants behind you a little bit, you know, and so I talked to the Veteran Service Commission, and they said, well, I guess we're allowed to do that. So I didn't have to solicit anybody. They gave us the money.
Good. Good.
Which I was surprised. This a lot easier than I thought it was going to be financially. So that was really great.
Well, it shouldn't be that hard to do something like
Yeah.
that anyway, but you never know.
Yeah, you'd have thought that anybody that wanted to put a monument up for the soldiers, there'd be no problem with anybody, and somebody give you flack all the time, and especially this one lady. She just, in fact, the day they set the monument up, she was down there. In fact, I guess she had lost her job the day before, and she had no business being down there, but she down there gave me a hard time.
What was her problem with it? I mean,
She didn't want it in the Soldiers Park. So I don't know. She had the problem. I didn't have.
right. I mean, I think that's a very fitting place to have it.
She had the problem. But anyhow, we got it done, and had a real good turnout, and a lot of guys that. You see people on the street, you never know what they do. So these guys show up and they got a Purple Heart. There must have been more than you'd ever suspect that showed up for that day. What are you doing, Norma? Yeah, we blew a railroad bridge one day. Of course, when you do that, anything around there, the vibrations and concussion blows up a lot of them, blows the windows out and so forth. Boy, this old Frenchman come down there just madder than hell. We just gave him a slip of paper and signed it. Piece of paper was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and said, he'll take care of it.
Gotta get him off your back.
He's happy now. Well, if we didn't blow the bridges, the Germans would blow them ahead of us, and a lot of times what they would do, they generally blow the center span. That would just collapse the bridge like that. Well, then you'd have to blow the abutments off to put new abutment on it. One day we blew one in the hell box, and when you turn that down, your electric current goes into your caps, and it didn't go off. And I thought, oh boy, because you have to get down to see what's around it, and that thing can go off anytime. Right. We pushed it down one more time, boy, it just went off, bang. And Elmer was standing there, and it must have been at least 2 or 3 minutes from the time that the explosion was. And all of a sudden, clunk, and a big chunk of concrete come down and hit him right on the helmet. That's what you call having a bad day.
I guess.
So we got a big laugh out of that.
You gotta laugh about things, don't you?
A lot of bad things too, but
I think it's how you cope, isn't it?
It does wear you down. It seems like we could have had more time off to kind of recuperate and relax a little bit. But like I say, if we had a day back, we were back doing something else, building a bridge or doing something like that, repairing something. But at least you wasn't in combat, so. But it does wear you down. It really does.
So, did you have any leave time once you started in the field? I mean,
No.
Going across there?
We were on call really all the time. In fact, at Bastogne, you probably heard Bastogne, and that was the night that Patton took the whole daggone army about 120 some miles, and the roads were terrible, icy, and so what they were trying to do was get the tanks up there to break into Bastogne to break through Bastogne. But boy, that was a bad, and we didn't stop for anything or nothing. It was about 100 miles, and it took us most of the night, most of the next morning to get there. But like I said, the roads are just covered with ice. It would just the tanks would slide sideways, and they still, instead of going forward, they just it was really bad.
So, what were you on? I mean, were you just on a truck?
It's a truck, yeah. We had a truck that had our toolboxes and our demolitions and all the equipment on. And they were long toolboxes, There's 4 of them, 2 on each side of the truck. And I'm telling the story about we'd finished putting up a little bridge across some little stream or little river, and there's a bunch of chickens running around up there, and why don't you go up there and get a couple of those chickens? We'll have some fried chicken. So the guy goes, we couldn't catch them. So Frank Lindman, he was from Lancaster, and I said, we'll go up there and run them in the chicken house and put a prop in there like we always did at home, and catch them inside. So we had maybe half a dozen chickens, and we brought them back to the truck and stuck them in the toolboxes. And we were about ready to pull out, and here this Jeep pulls up there, and the chaplain, he said, how you guys, anything we can do for you? And no, it's not. And the little chicken there, walk. He couldn't hardly keep a straight face. He knew what we were up to.
He didn't make you give them back.
But
No, I didn't.
no, those chickens, they'd been running around so wild over there for so long, you could, if you couldn't catch them in the chicken house, you had to shoot them. Anyway, they were so tough, the more you cook them, you boiled them, they would just be like rubber.
Well, tell 'em about the pig.
Well, we had an older gentleman in our outfit. He was 30-some years old. He was an insurance man, and couldn't hardly keep up with us guys, the younger guys. So we'd always kind of appoint him in charge of quarter and let him take care of things while we were gone and watch our barracks bags and this and that. But if we had a chance to pick up some fresh vegetable stuff or fruit, we would, and get back to our hidey hole, and we'd share whatever we had. So I went back one night and he said, hey, I really got something good. What's that? He went back and had an old razorback hog penned up about that. So that was a little much. But we'd get stuff out of the gardens, and during that time the apples or peaches and everything were ripe, In fact, I got shot getting peaches one day. And that's a story I've told Willard many times. Big peach tree up there on the hillside, and oh man, I love peaches. And I said, I'm going up there and get a couple. And he said, you better go up there. Nah, they wouldn't shoot at just one guy. They won't bother you. I got up there and I got about nice big peaches like that. Well, you couldn't carry very many, so I just stuffed them in my shirt. And about the time I got them all in my shirt, in come the mortars. So I hurried to run down over the hillside, and there was a little cement wall there about so high. When I went to get over the wall, I either jumped over the wall and stumbled after I got over, or caught my foot on it. But anyhow, I squashed my peaches. Oh. but we had some peaches out of it anyway.
Goodness.
Funny story.
Yeah, that's a good a lot of work, and you didn't get your peaches.
I never did that.
I was surprised there was that much left in the gardens and stuff. I mean,
yeah, well,
you guys would go through there.
Like fruit trees and so forth. Of course, a lot of places the people had just moved out. Just left town, and everything was there. Just like you'd get up today and walk away and leave your house like this. But the Frenchmen in the morning, they would get up in a cold morning and they would start a little fire in their little stove. And that would be it till in the evening. They didn't burn a lot of wood. So one day I started a fire in the stove, and I went out in the little yard there, and there was a bunch of sticks tied together. So I just gathered up 2 or 3 of them, took them back in and started to burn them. Oh, the old Frenchman, he just got so upset. my chicken fence, my chicken fence, my chicken fence. Okay. But they had to use the wood sparingly, I guess, and I was burning up his chicken fence.
Well, I appreciate this time. I did start recording again.
I believe. And one of them drowned in the river that night. And we tried to get the other brother to go home, or get him home, because he was the only survivor, male in the family. And a couple weeks later, he was killed. So we had two brothers that were killed in our outfit, which, if they'd have got on the ball and got the paperwork done, maybe he'd still been alive. So that's a lot of stories, so many stories.
Does a vet watch old war movies?
Well, I watch them a lot, but I get a kick out of it because that couldn't be. That's not possible.
Okay, thank you.
They several times, different organizations will say, wear your uniform. And Dale said, I can hardly wear when I came back to the States in a pajama top.
Yeah.
He was in a body cast, and
My goodness.
he said they needed, 100 pounds
Yeah, to fill out the load. Yeah.
to finish out the load. And so they came along, and he was on a stretcher with his body cast, and he weighed 98 pounds. So he said, I was the last one on the plane in England, the first one off in the States.
So you were 98 pounds?
Yeah.
How hard? I mean, were you that small when you went into the service?
Yeah, well, I
Or was
never
it
weighed
just you
much
didn't
over.
eat, they didn't feed you?
I weighed 120 pounds when I went in, and I didn't gain all that much, except while I was on the water point. I went down to the commissary, and the guy said, how many men have you got on your water point? And I said, well, 8. Okay, you draw rations for 8 men. There was only 4 of us, so we ate we ate pretty good.
And his glasses wouldn't fit, he said, because he gained so much weight.
Oh my goodness. What's water point?
It was supplying water to the troops.
Oh, okay.
You purify the water. But it was kind of funny when we were in Tennessee on maneuvers and had our water point going, and pretty soon the Blue Army would pull in, get water, give us some candy bars or cigarettes, and go on. Pretty soon the Red Army would come in, get water, and give us some cigarettes. We supplied water, either one, didn't matter. So it was kind of funny.
Now, when he was at the hospital in England, he had an English lady who was a volunteer. And when he came back, his mother wrote and thanked her and so forth. And when they decided they wanted to come to America to live, his mom sponsored them.
Well, that's
Now, she was living in San Antonio, Texas, and her and his sister. And so that's where they went. And so they had, their son he was just a teenager, wasn't he, when they came over here. And so it was she hadn't seen Dale in about 12 years. And they came up to visit us. And so it was interesting to listen to them tell about what they went through in England and so forth. But she said she sat up with Dale one night in the hospital when he was so dehydrated that he couldn't close his eyes. He didn't have enough moisture in his body. And she said he slept all night with his eyes open. And then he said she came in one day and there was a Hershey bar laying on his stand, and she looked at it and she said, chocolate. And he said, would you like to have it? And he said she cried. It's been so long. So then tell her what you did. Tell him what you did.
Give her a whole box of them.
He had a whole box of them under his bed, and so he
stash.
gave it to her. But she said of course they had blackout, and she said, I stayed at the hospital too long one night, and so they couldn't turn the car lights on to go home. And son at the time was 12, and she said he sat on the hood of the car and held his arms out like this and felt the bushes along the road to get them home.
Of course, the roads over there is only that wide.
Right.
You know? So
And
I have
then,
to tell you, that I had several surgeries while I was in England, and the day President Roosevelt died, I had had surgery that morning, I guess. But anyhow, when I woke up, I missed a little Romanian nurse. Her name was Trudiak, I believe, something like that. And she was crying, and oh God, I'm going to die. And she said, no, she said, today President Roosevelt died. Of course, everybody felt bad about that. But I thought sure I was a loser then. I thought, oh God, I'm going to die.
The first time you were wounded, where did you get wounded on your body?
Some shrapnel in the skull.
Now, is all the shrapnel out of your body, or do you set off metal detectors at the airport?
I still have shrapnel in my chest.
So it sounds to me like that second time really
Oh yeah, yeah.
got you good.
When
I'll have to show you the last piece of shrapnel they took out of me. I've got in the room there. I'll show it to you before we leave. But it went through my OD belt and into the vertebrae and lodged between the vertebrae. And of course, then they had to take it out. And the doctor came in there one day to drain the wound, which you had to do that every morning because they would flush it out. So I told him, I said, that's coming out my back. And he said, oh, you can't. Rolled me over, and at the tube, they ran it right through my stomach, right out my back, right straight through me. So it was straight through. But
Did you have any paralysis? Were you paralyzed at all from that for temporarily, or?
For probably, while I was in England, I couldn't move my legs, my feet, and on account of the spinal thing. And then eventually one day I saw my toes wiggle, and it got better from there. So I got the feeling back.
couldn't have solid food either, could you? For a long
Yeah, I
time.
think Jell-O and stuff like that eventually. But I
That's
probably
not
didn't have
food.
anything to eat for about a week, you know.
So by the time you hit the States, you were probably about 60 pounds, probably, weren't you?
I didn't weigh that much before. Until when we got on the ship, I only weighed 120 pounds, and the barracks bag and the rifle and everything else probably weighed down there as much as I did. It seemed like I couldn't hardly walk up the gangplank. It was so heavy.
Did you tell him when you was it Louisville, that you got there late in the evening and the kitchen was closed?
Yeah, they took me by train from Nashville to Louisville. And on the way, I got tired. I was in the body cast, and I really got tired. And they had sent I don't think it was a doctor, but kind of like an associate medic. And so he told the porter, he said, I want you to make up a bunk for this guy. And so, oh, we can't do that. So eventually they did. They made up a bunk, and I got to lay down because in those days that train stopped at every railroad crossing to pick up a gallon of milk or whatever. But anyhow, when I got to the hospital, it was late and there wasn't anybody there. And I hadn't had any supper. So one of the guys was in bed. He had fallen off of a horse and broke his back. And he was in the body cast. And I could walk if I could get up. But if I was laying down, I couldn't get up. So somebody helped me up, and I walked out to the kitchen. He said, well, out there and see what's out there. So there was, of course, no food. So coming back through the barracks, there was a couple private rooms there. And so I asked this redhead kid, I said, who's in the, who gets the room? He said, oh, that's for the officers. I said, well, how about that? So I just went in and got in bed.
Now listen to this.
So I was in bed here about 3 days before they found out I wasn't an officer.
He said the first morning the nurse came in and said, "Well, Mr. or Captain Miller, what do you want for breakfast?" You know, and brought his newspaper in and so forth. He said one doctor thought it was funny when they found out the other doctor went to.
So, like I say, many stories. Many stories. Some good, some bad.
Well, like I say, when Mr. and Mrs. Hockey came to visit us that summer, I don't know who called the advocate, but anyway, Dale and Mr. and Mrs. Hockey went down with his mom, and they all had their picture taken. It was in the advocate and all that. And but anyway, Mrs. Hockey, I wanted to tell you this. She had what they called a woolen shop, which was yarn and things like that. And she said she had to close it because she couldn't get the material and stuff. And she said we had an wrought iron fence around our yard and around the porch. And she said we got up one morning and it was all gone. She said they needed the metal and they came in the night and they took what they... And she said if you had any pewter in your house, they asked that you turn that in. She said, now a lot of people didn't, but she said my family did. And but
Wow.
Well,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
was-
England suffered probably a couple years before we ever got into the war. And I know the first time I walked out with, I guess it was an orange or some kind of fruit. They hadn't seen fresh fruit for